It's perfectly natural to feel more comfortable with people who look like you, talk like you, dress like you, believe like you. But that's not the reality of living in Australia today. Well, to some extent, it never has been. So, how do you feel when you encounter someone who's obviously from a different ethnic or religious background to you? Nervous? Unsure? Curious? Fearful? Angry? You can't necessarily help how you feel, but you can decide what you do next.
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
Hey, welcome to Signs of the Times Radio. It's the month of May, and with us on the phone, via Skype actually, from Toowoomba is Jacob Uglesha. How are you, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm doing good, and good work saying my name right.
Yeah, excellent. Yes, I tried tried my best. Now, Jacob, you've written an article for us, the cover article actually, in the May edition of Signs of the Times, entitled "Who is My Neighbour?" And you've told us a little bit about some encounters that you have had with some of the people in your town, so literally your neighbours. But before we go there, just give us a little bit of background on Toowoomba, like what it's like, what the vibe is there, and what you do yourself.
Yeah, I've been in Toowoomba for about 2 years now, and it's been pretty good because being here has been a bit of a change from a big city. I mean, it is still a city, and it's about 100,000 or so. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I'm from Brisbane, and it's a bit bigger there. But coming here, it felt a bit like a country town at first, but it's grown on me. And then something that's kind of cool that's been happening is Toowoomba has been taking in quite a bit of refugees from Syria. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people from the Yazidi culture and religion, and just quite a few from Iraq and Afghanistan. So there's quite an influx of different cultures coming in, and I think they're taking on about 700 plus a year.
Wow. Okay.
It's quite a changing city, and we'll change more into the future.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting, because I guess Toowoomba, around Australia has a reputation of being, I guess, a bit of a Bible Belt town. There are a lot of Christians there. Politics is often fairly conservative. I understand you're at the Glenvale Adventist Church. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I also am at the school called Darling Downs Christian School.
Okay.
So half-time as a chaplain and half-time as a pastor. And you're right, it is the Bible Belt, or considered so. Lots of churches. I think statistically 1 in 7 people attend church once a month. So that's well and truly above the national average.
Yeah, very much so. Okay. And so your Glenvale Adventist Church, does that mean you're working alongside Pastor Casey Wolverton?
Yeah, that's him. Yep.
Right, yeah, because I've spoken to him from time to time, and he's told me that he's really passionate about connecting with other churches in the area, participating in events together, and reaching out to the local mosque and having sort of interfaith dialogue. Has this sort of passion rubbed off on you a bit, has it?
A little bit, hey. And I think that connections that he's wanted to build has flowed on, and so that we can do stuff. So we're not just isolated, we're actually part of this work that's going. So it's across denominations, across religions. It's really bringing people closer together throughout this whole thing. So it's really cool working with Casey, and he definitely has rubbed off on me in that sense.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. And I seem to recall, I was, before your time, before you were there, but I think there was actually a fire at a mosque in Toowoomba several years back, and your associate, your senior pastor there, was one of the people who sort of went to, express, commiserations with the local mosque leaders and stuff. So it seems like there's a bit of a history, but the article that you wrote for us in Signs of the Times gives a little bit of detail on some efforts that you made, not to do so much sort of formal connections, with people, with leaders of other religions, but sort of a one-on-one contact with people who live around your church. And you've given them the names Zahira and Sabir in your article, but I understand those aren't their real names, but let's stick with those for the purpose of this interview. So tell us about, you're a church pastor, you've got plenty to do in your own church. Why go and visit the neighbours? What was that all about?
Yeah, well, I mean, most people when they're at the age of 18, this is where it all started, they'd probably be out doing other things, I guess. I don't know what 18-year-olds do now, but it definitely was a weird thing for me to just get this idea to go out and get to know the neighbors a bit more. And yeah, and so I just, I wanted to make my church more than just like a place that was there once a week. I wanted to get to know people more and take it, just get more excited about the community that I'm in, because I felt like I didn't know anyone. And so, started knocking on doors, and I knocked on this one particular door. I remember it was this green, like that, the dark green color in this apartment area. And and just got this kind of, the door creaked open, and there was Sabir. I'll use his fake name. And he was kind of not suspicious, but kind of just cautious. I think that's probably the best way to do it. And cautious to, like, who's this guy, weird 18-year-old kid at my door. But within 5 minutes of just chatting, it just opened up completely, like it was awesome. Just this opportunity to get to know this person, even though his English was quite broken, being from Egypt and only being there for a year. It was a really good experience to get to know him more.
Wow. Okay. So I guess, a lot of church buildings sort of sit in the middle of their, particular suburb or whatever. And, the neighbours around kind of see cars pull in on the weekend and cars pull out, and maybe hear a little bit of singing or music or some kids, running around the car park, playing chasey or whatever. But that's about it. So I guess what you're saying here is that you're wanting to build that connection between your local church and the houses surrounding in your suburb. Is that basically what it's about?
Yeah, and being an 18-year-old, I felt at that time, and even till now, like it feels like I had to maybe get a lot of money and put on some event or something. But it just started with going out there and speaking to them, because I feel like we just put up so many rules and boundaries. Like, oh man, when will make the time and effort to go out and get to know people more? Because we're all just busy, work, play, whatever that we do, and then we just neglect some people in our community that really want support and really want to get to know this country that they're in. And in the case of people from other countries, but also just Australians, they want to get to know each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, look, judging by your accent, Jacob, I'd say you're probably born in Australia yourself, but judging by your surname, I wonder if perhaps it's not too many generations back that your family has had the migrant experience. Would I be right about that?
Yeah, well, I'm born here, and my parents came when they were about 8 years old. So, that my parents were immigrants, and so I kind of understand what it's like to an extent. It's tough kind of having to move and learn the language. My parents and my grandparents especially, the English is a bit tough, they're trying to figure it out. And
sure, we all are, mate.
yeah. I mean, it's a difficult language. But so, and then, the opportunities are less, it seems, coming here. They didn't have people ready to send them to university or anything like that. They had to do the hard jobs and whatever they could take. So I can imagine it's like that for all immigrants.
So your own family history gives you a little bit of sympathy, I guess, a little bit of understanding of what a newer migrant might be going through. Yeah, fair enough. So look, I find it interesting that you say, these guys, Sabir and his wife Zahira, as you said, opened their doors and, eventually invited you in. I remember doing a little bit of a similar thing around a church in Sydney at Fairfield, where after the church service one day, there was a special event coming up in a couple of weeks. So we sort of wandered up and down the street near the church, just knocking on doors, inviting people, hey, we've got an event, the whole neighbourhood's invited, yada, yada, yada. But there were a couple of families in particular. I think they were from an Assyrian background, from Iraq and Syria, so similar sort of thing that you're talking about. And I could not believe how they just, with total strangers, they just invited us right in. Again, similar, English is a difficulty, and straight away it was, hey, do you want a cup of coffee? Do you want a cup of tea? Have a seat, blah, blah, blah. And then there's all other people sort of turning up to the house and they're introducing them to us. It's not like, not like we interrupted, something. It was like we were just immediately included and immediately, part of everything. I thought, wow, some of these Middle Eastern cultures just have an incredible culture of hospitality, and it just blew me away.
Yeah, so enriching. You can get so much from just spending a day with them, and then you start realizing, wow, that's how you hang out with people. That's how you spend time with friends and family, and then including others. I don't think you'll ever go hungry and never feel like you haven't had enough to eat or drink when you go and visit someone from Syria or from Afghanistan. Like they'll lavish food all over you, and you'll kind of roll out of there. That's my experience, at least.
Wow, far out. So for how long have you been friends with these guys now?
Well, I mean, I've got quite a few from different countries. So probably, since I was 18, one of my close friends from Egypt. So I'm 26 now, so I'm trying to do the maths in my head. But
okay,
about 8 years
so that's
ago.
8 years, okay.
Yep.
So this isn't just one day you thought you had a wonderful idea and you had a positive conversation and that's it. This is a long-standing sort of number of relationships that you've been building. Okay. I didn't realize that. So this particular couple, Sabir and Sahira, what did you sort of learn about them as you got to know them?
Yeah, well, I mean, the big thing that I realized was that once they moved here, she was training to become a pharmacist, and that required 7 years of study in Egypt and then more here.
Oh, wow.
So, a lot of studies go into it. But now that she's qualified, she hasn't been able to get a job. They haven't picked her up at all. And her husband is also trained in pharmacy, but same thing. And so he's working as a security guard at a chemist and just, at the door checking bags. Yeah, he's got all this experience and training. And so, something I've realized is that even though they've, probably got more training or experience than others, they're not going to get the same chances for a lot of the time. I don't know why that often is the case. Usually it's the English kind of thing. It's not as good. But I've noticed that, they do it a lot more harder. I know, Sabia suffers from pretty bad back pain, and so doing a job like that where you're standing all day, causes a lot of issues, and they don't get a whole lot of support either. So I could just see the struggles that they go through. Real battlers.
Wow, and they've got 2 kids as well?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, okay. Because your article sort of starts with a particular incident that happened to Zahira while she was walking just down the street, from home. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So they lived about 3 blocks away or 4 blocks away from the hospital, pretty big one in Brisbane, and so she was walking down, and it's on a main road, and she's just standing there, and she said that a car came around the corner, pulled up next to her. And I think it was at the lights, and then just started swearing at her and saying many insults. I think in the article I had to tame it down, but when she told me exactly. And I'm just thinking
the
to myself,
words they used, and they weren't nice.
They were very colourful. They were very colourful words.
So these are 2 guys in a car, yeah?
Yep. Wow. And so the insults come thrown at her, and then the kids are just standing there while this is all happening, and she's walking home with them.
Yeah, and are these insults directed at what sort of flavour do they have? I mean, obviously, we don't need you to repeat the bad language, but what?
Very racist, very towards her. Obviously she wears the headscarf, and so that comes into it, and just all sorts of things like that.
Right, so she was visibly Muslim, and that was. It seems like that was the thing that had sort of triggered this torrent of abuse that she copped.
Yeah, no doubt. If I said that she was, from Australia, you'd kind of think, oh, that's really weird that somebody would randomly do that to a mother with her children. But it's very much things like terrorist and all this sort of terrible things. So
goodness me. So this was a few years back in Brisbane, rather than in Toowoomba. Okay, all right. And how old were the kids at that time?
I remember them being in grade 4 and I think grade 2, so they're about 2 years apart.
Wow.
Yeah.
So pretty young, but old enough to understand and old enough to ask, what was all that about? Old enough to be scared, I imagine.
Yeah. So they walk home after that, and I visited not long after. I think it was about a week or 2 before, and then they tell me the story, and the kids are sitting there just kind of nodding every time she's telling me the story. That's how it happened. That. And just feeling I mean, how do you sit and listen to a story like that, and brought me to tears.
Wow. And you mentioned in the article that she was also in tears at the time, like just recalling it.
Yeah. And the husband you could see he's not happy. Like every time she tells the story, like it hurt a lot, the whole family. And then,
Yeah, wow. And so is this an isolated thing, or is this something you've heard sort of different versions of from the various, different Muslim friends that you've made?
Well, like when this recent thing that happened in Christchurch happened, I remember sending a couple of messages out to friends, and I know one friend, he messaged back, he's about my age, he was saying that his family were a little bit afraid now to attend the mosque and a little bit afraid to go out. And so I think like it wouldn't be an isolated thing. Like you hear it often, just people saying jokes and things like, and then after an event would happen, like maybe overseas, the first people they blame is the people close to them. And so that blame is easy to attribute to somebody that you can see. And so like he would tell me of things at school that would happen to him, and often. So I mean, like it's not isolated, no way.
Okay. So I mean, you mentioned the Christchurch shootings, which were obviously horrific, and we're still sort of trying to make sense of it, including the the Australian connection with the shooter. I mean, it's just horrific. So what sort of, like, in speaking to your Muslim friends, in Toowoomba or in Brisbane or wherever about this, what sort of response are you getting? What sort of reaction are they having?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it seems to be like they're trying to figure out what's going on, just like anyone would be. And like when you talk to them, like how they're doing, I know I messaged one friend, and not Sabir as a hero, and I just said, I heard what happened, and I'm just praying for you and your family. And and they just responded and said, wow, that's we really appreciate that. And one friend was like, oh man, my mum was really like afraid because I think she knew someone from the mosque, and so and so that kind of it hits close to home, and all the all the thoughts come into your head, like, what if that was me? And, so that was kind of the feeling that I got coming from them, because it's like someone from their community,
Yeah, wow. Hey, look, something you said, you wrote in your article, I think is just incredibly quotable, and I'd like to quote it back to you, like right now, if you like, and you can like expand on it a bit. You said, maybe the difference between people who spew hatred and those who give love is that those who love have listened. What I mean, I think that's a great little summary, really. But what do you mean? What difference does listening make?
Yeah, well, imagine if those guys that were in the car that hurled those insults at Zahira, like what would have happened if they were sitting on the couch where I was, and then they got to hear what it was like for someone else to do? Like, would they have gone and wound down their window, slowed their car to a stop, and started yelling? I can guarantee you, if it was someone close to us, we wouldn't do that. So as soon as you get to know a person, you're less likely to see them as just another enemy or another problem, and
a target of your fear.
Target, anything like that, and you're more willing to, okay, hey, this is somebody that's valuable, and you hear their story, you hear their experiences, you eat their food, you sit on their couch, and this is just like anybody else. So why would I treat them like that?
Yeah, wow. Now, look, you're a pastor. Obviously, you've said that they're in Toowoomba. So you must have a theology that sort of undergirds this, these things that you've put into practice, this sort of deliberate effort to get out there and connect with people who are from a different background and religion. I mean, I think particularly of Jesus' words, where he said, whatever, the golden rule, what is it? Help me out.
Or do unto others as you'd have them do to you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, is that sort of at the foundation of where you're at, or is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, a theology is how you see God, right? And if you see God as somebody who's closing off people groups, then that's a pretty small God, right? Like, so I see God as someone who breaks down these walls that separate us and that we like to set up, and I think that's definitely something you see Jesus doing. Like, he doesn't choose only some people who are very popular and who are very well loved and, who are doing all the right things. He picks the worst. And
Can you give some examples? Just that some of our listeners may have never read, the Gospels or any stories about Jesus.
The perfect thing, the one that came to mind, just as you said that, was there's a woman who is caught for her sexual misdeeds, and she's dragged before Jesus by the religiously pure and, the really good people. And they're trying to trap Jesus, but he instead uses it as an opportunity to give her a second chance. Another one that also came to mind is a guy who was dishonest with money. His name was Zacchaeus, and everyone hated him for it. Yeah, well, he was a collaborator with the Roman occupiers, wasn't he? So exactly. And so,
as well as a rip-off merchant.
Yeah, perfect person to hate on.
Yep.
And Jesus chooses to spend time with him and hang out at his house. I mean, like, how controversial can you get? Yeah. And so he's spending time with this guy and just changes his life, but doesn't expect anything. He just says, today, salvation's come to this house. Today, this is the day when, your life is going to turn around. And he recognizes, wow, I'm valued, even though Jesus didn't have to do that. And so it's just amazing what can happen when the wall comes down between us, that we can actually, people's lives can change for better.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you really do have a very clear biblical view that, like, real Christianity actually involves reaching across the cultural barriers, the language barriers, the racial barriers, the even religious barriers to connect with other people.
Yep.
Yeah, wow. And I think, there's the whole idea right in the very beginning. It says, humans were created in the image of God. So therefore, regardless of anyone's background, they are created in the image of God. And Jesus himself said, which is, I guess, something that's powerful to Christians in particular, that when you help someone who is, at the most disadvantaged place of their lives, it's as if you're helping Jesus himself. He says, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, it's like you did it for me. That's some sort of powerful stuff, isn't it?
And it, like, the center of the three largest religions in the world, the Abrahamic religions, is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And they look to Abraham as someone they value. And Abraham's initial call was to bless the nations. That's what his role was, and that means he was meant to make the world better, and bring it together, like to break down those walls. So, it's built into all of the biggest religions of this world. It's just sad that sometimes we forget that.
Yeah, wow. No, that is true. And Abraham is also an example of hospitality par excellence, isn't he? Like strangers are walking on the road and he's like, hey, come, it's hot today, stop by. I'll whip you up something to eat. Like 3 hours later, he's still sort of, slow cooking the mutton or whatever. But that's Middle Eastern hospitality for you, though. So, so for those of us who are listening, who are thinking, well, I'm not a pastor of a church. I don't have an excuse to go and knock on someone's door randomly and say, hi, I'm the local pastor. Would you like me to pray for you? But they do feel this sense that, I would like to be more connected with my community. I would like to meet people who are perhaps from a different background from me. What sort of practical tips could you give them to get started with that?
Well, Sabir and Zahira were just one example of where that happened. But, one of my friends, I'll just call him Ahmed, he basically, he's just a friend from school. A lot of us have friends that we, or people that we work with, or just people we know who might be from another culture, or they could be Muslim or anything like that. And just start with them. People who are closest to us. Because
you're right, Jacob, aren't you? You're right, because it's increasingly the case that you don't have to go to find the, in inverted commas, ethnics, because they're increasingly all around us, particularly in city, sort of metropolitan kind of contexts. Yeah.
Yeah, they're coming to us. We don't really have an excuse not to care and support and love them, because they're coming into our neighborhoods, and they could be our neighbor, And so what better excuse than, hey, I live next door to you? And because in the Middle East, everybody knows each other in a street.
Yeah.
It's only in the West that we choose to ignore our neighbors and avoid them.
Yep.
Hopefully we don't do that. But
I blame two technologies, Jacob. Number one, the television, which keeps us all inside and looking at screens. And it's not just television now; it's plenty of other screens. The other thing is air conditioning. You close all the windows and doors, and you get the climate control exactly how you want. Whereas like back in the old days, if it was a warm sort of afternoon, you'd sit out on the front porch and people would wander past and you'd chat over the fence or whatever. I think these technologies in particular have a lot to answer for.
Maybe we have to have like air conditioning parties where everyone just comes over, sits around the aircon.
Yes. We had some actually during some, I think it was during some bushfires or after a big storm or something, all the power went out, and we ended up we still had power in our house, but not many people ever did. So we ended up with electricity refugees in our lounge room.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, like something that's, this is another church thing, but it's actually, I didn't start it. A group of us decided just to go down to the park and play soccer and invite anyone we knew who is considered themselves a refugee. Mm-hmm. As a result of that, my barber, who's from Turkey, he basically said, and he's like the best barber, he does pretty good cuts on my hair. Yep. And he basically said to me, "Oh, I'll come and do free cuts for you." So this guy is now so I'm a Christian, my barber's a Muslim, and the refugees that come to the soccer are all Yazidi, and he's doing cuts for them. Whereas in Syria, it was ISIS who was taking away their homes and, considered themselves Muslim. And now my barber, who is a Muslim, is actually cutting their hair and trying to, help them. That's what it's about, right? Like, it's bringing everyone together. Yeah.
No, that's incredible. Look, I really appreciate you talking to us today, Jacob, and I really appreciate the the efforts you're making to get out there and connect with people and build that sense of community. I guess if you are a Christian, and you're a pastor, so you have to be. This is a great sort of way to put your faith into action, and I think that's what people admire. Like anyone can talk up a storm about their religion and their beliefs and pass judgment on this or that, but it takes someone with genuine faith to actually get out there and put their faith into action in a positive and affirming way, and crossing boundaries and taking risks in the way that you have. So I find that really inspirational, and I hope our listeners do too.
Hey, thanks so much. There's always more we could be doing, but at the end of the day, we just got to look out for our neighbour, hey.
Yeah, no worries. Sounds fantastic. Thanks heaps, Jacob Uglesha.
Hey, thank you.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.